I got some positive feedback on last week's video, so I'm running it back today with 5 more players to either buy or sell in Dynasty with actionable trade suggestions for each one to make sure your Dynasty team is looking good for NFL Week 1, which is coming up sooner than you think. My name is Paul, this is Pure Potential. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, leave a comment, let's go. All right, in my last video, I talked about Tua and A.J. Brown and David Montgomery, Jerry Jeudy, Kyron Williams. So if you want to know what I think about those guys, I will put a link to that video in the description. But like I said, I've got 5 new players to talk to you about today. And as always, keep in mind that my player takes and my evaluation of the Dynasty market is based on a 12-team, full PPR, super flex, tight end premium setting. So the first move for today is buy Emeka Egbuka. He is the 62nd overall player on fantasycalc.com, the wide receiver at 20 on that site. And this is not me jumping on the bandwagon now that Chris Godwin seems to be less than 100%. I was ahead of consensus on Egbuka from the start. I had him ranked ahead of Judkins and Tyler Warren in my first set of rookie rankings. But I do think there's still an opportunity to get on board here with Egbuka before the train leaves the station. He is a very clean prospect. He was a 5-star recruit going into college. He broke out early as a sophomore at Ohio State. He was productive across his college career despite playing with really good wide receivers. And then he goes top 20 in the NFL draft, which I think was really the cherry on top to say, yeah, his production is real. The NFL values it as real. He's not just some slot player, but he has legit NFL skills. And now he's stepping into a great offensive environment in Tampa Bay. Godwin is still not 100%, as recent reports have indicated. There's a whole controversy about his ankle looking swollen in a jersey photo shoot. And I don't even know like how real that stuff is or how limited Godwin will be to start the season. I just don't really care. The thing about Egbuka is that he can play from any wide receiver slot. He's gotten a constant drumbeat in recent weeks from coaches, media. Even Baker Mayfield praised him like totally unprompted on the New Heights podcast, calling him an absolute stud, saying that he can play any wide receiver spot. And the Bucs last year were near the league lead in 11 personnel usage. And I expect them to be near the league lead again because they have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Jalen McMillan, who was interesting last year. And of course, spending a top 20 pick on Egbuka, they wouldn't have done that if they didn't have plans to use him a lot. So I think he's going to have nearly a full-time role from week 1. And then there's a ton of upside if Godwin's not ready for him to just hit the ground running and immediately gain a ton of value. So then the question is, what should we be trading for Emeka Egbuka? And as always, as I present these trade possibilities, I have to throw out the caveat that obviously these deals are not going to work in every league. What I'm doing is suggesting things that I would try that seem possible based on the consensus rankings on fantasycalc.com, keeptradecut.com, the trade database that you can find on FantasyCalc and KeepTradeCut that looks at actual trades that have been done. So I'm trying to keep this within the realm of possibility, but it's always going to come down to the specific evaluations in your league. So just with that out of the way, the first suggestion I would make is to pivot from these 2 wide receivers. I would rather have Emeka Egbuka than Rome Odunze and Devonta Smith. Rome Odunze, kind of a similar bet where it's a younger player you're hoping can break out, but I prefer the clean slate of Egbuka, who hasn't already had a disappointing rookie season. Whatever the, you want to justify the context. Obviously, there are reasons why Odunze's production wasn't where it was expected to be. But at the same time, you can't just write it all off. And then the dynasty market is not going to write it all off. He is a year 2 player. He's going to be expected to deliver sooner than Egbuka is, who's going to get more grace as a rookie. That's just how we see these things work. And then I would also trade Devonta Smith, who, from a median perspective, will probably outscore Egbuka this year. But I don't think it's totally outside the realm of possibility that could be flipped, especially if you just look at the back half of the season. We've seen guys like even Ladd McConkey, who wasn't as touted as a prospect. These rookies can come on late and provide a lot of production. But more importantly, the value upside is just significantly higher, where Devonta Smith's going to turn 27 this year. He is wide receiver 2 to A.J. Brown. Egbuka, the value of the unknown is very high here. So these are good players that I'm talking about. That's how high I am on Egbuka as a prospect. Another type of trade that you can make would be pivoting from a running back. And this especially makes sense if you're looking to reduce risk on your team, or maybe you're looking to transition to a rebuild year, or you just want to maintain a little more flexibility in case you need to rebuild. But I think you'd be justified in trading any of these running backs straight up for Emeka Egbuka, Kyren Williams, Josh Jacobs, James Cook, Derrick Henry. I know some of you watching right now are thinking, that's crazy. I would never trade these workhorse running backs for some rookie wide receiver who's probably third on his depth chart. And then there's a bunch of people watching who are thinking, there's no way that anybody in my league would give up Emeka Egbuka for these running backs. And that's just, it varies from league to league how much people are going to value the guaranteed touches at running back. But for me personally, I don't have strong enough conviction on any of these running backs to say that I'm definitely prioritizing them over a wide receiver like Egbuka in a full PPR format that, again, I think has massive upside. And then finally, I think you could look at tiering up from some non-difference making wide receivers that are sort of valued in that late 1, early 2 range. DJ Moore comes to mind as an option there. Jameson Williams, maybe a controversial pick. I understand there are some people that are a lot higher on him. He's getting a lot of positive buzz. He's younger than some of these other names. So, you know, fair play if you want to hold on to Jameson Williams. I personally would rather tier up to Egbuka. And then DK Metcalf or Jerry Jeudy. Any of those guys, I think you could justify adding a second, especially if you're a likely playoff team, to get up to the rookie. If you're enjoying this video so far, I do want to encourage you one more time to hit the subscribe button. We are pushing towards 9,000. I promise you, you will not regret it. New Dynasty content each and every week, telling you who to buy, who to sell, how to build better Dynasty teams all year round. Now, our next player on the list today is Chase Brown, and we are buying at this price of RB16, 56th overall on Fantasy Calc. Why are we buying Chase Brown? Because his production last year after taking over the backfield from Zach Moss was absolutely insane, especially as a receiver. But if you look at week 6, that's the first game that Chase Brown played over 50% of the snaps from that point through week 17, which was 11 games, so not a terribly small sample. Chase Brown ranked first in running back expected fantasy points per game, according to the Fantasy Points data suite, and 7th in actual PPR points per game. 18 points per game on 19.3 expected is incredible usage for any running back. I think what's happening here with Chase Brown's price is that there was a good amount of risk with him prior to free agency, prior to the NFL draft, where this backfield was wide open. The team could certainly have added a running back. They brought in both the Ohio State guys for visits, but the team only added Samaje Perine and Taj Brooks in the 6th round. And it feels like the market has kind of lagged behind in adjusting to that information. He's certainly risen in value. He's been a pretty steady riser since the draft, but he still feels underpriced relative to both his median projection and his upside case, which if it's not overall RB1 type of upside, it's pretty darn close. Offensive coordinator Dan Pitcher called Chase Brown a focal point of the offense. He certainly was a focal point last year down the stretch, and I think people were right to question whether that was deliberate or if that was just a team that had no other options. Based on the team's actions, it seems like it was deliberate, and it's going to continue pretty much. I think Chase Brown is really just a better version of the Kyren Williams bet in every way. He's a day 3 running back who is reliant on heavy volume to pay off his price tag, but the offense he's in is better. His competition for touches is worse, and most importantly, he catches way more passes than Kyren. That makes me feel a lot better about his floor and his ceiling because he's getting like 4 or 5 targets every single game. I mean, he is well past Kyren in terms of the passing game usage, and that goes a long way in PPR. So to buy Chase Brown, I would like to do it without giving up a first, and certainly a lot of people are going to ask you for a first, because if you're sitting there with a running back that projects top 12, that's not a player most managers are looking to move off of. But there are still people that I think are skeptical of his background as a day 3 pick, that think last year was maybe kind of a mirage. So I'm going to offer you some other options. Like I said, I'd rather not trade a first because I'm typically reserving my firsts to get more scarce assets, ideally packaging that with other pieces to get young elite players that have a little more long-term security. But as far as the value range that he's in, I think he falls somewhere close to Emeka Egbuka, so you're going to see some of the same names here. I would pivot off of any of these running backs: Kyren Williams, Josh Jacobs, James Cook, Derrick Henry. I think Chase Brown has a more favorable combination of age, offensive environment, and receiving upside to be worth more than all of these players. Like, I think he could easily outscore all of them. I think even if Derrick Henry was to outscore him, there's obviously a 6-year age gap here that should matter to us. So I would take Chase Brown ahead of all these guys. You could also try tiering up from Caleb Johnson or Chuba Hubbard. I know Chuba was also kind of an XFP darling last year. He got a lot of usage. I think he was a little bit less impressive on that usage. I think the Panthers offense is obviously not the Bengals offense. And I think the additions of Rico Dowdle and Trevor Etienne, while they might not seem super significant to us, I think they might signal a reduction in passing down work for Chuba, because both of those guys are a little better in that regard. Dowdle's a good pass blocker. Etienne was kind of a passing down specialist in college, and Hubbard was really inefficient as a receiver last year. So I'd like to tier up, get to another level of upside in Chase Brown if possible. And then Caleb Johnson, I like the prospect. I don't think he's going to catch a lot of passes this year. I think Jalen Warren's going to be more involved than people would like him to be. And I'm not a big believer in the Steelers offense. So I would add a second to those guys. I think you could do it with less for Caleb Johnson. They're not ranked that far apart. But for Chuba Hubbard, I'd be willing to add a second because, again, I think it's a different level of producer. And then my last idea here is a little bit specific and a little bit unconventional. If you have Saquon Barkley and you want to still be able to access a high ceiling of production while protecting yourself against some injury risk or downside risk with a 28-year-old running back coming off 470 touches, what about trading Saquon Barkley for Chase Brown plus a first? I think in a lot of leagues, you can actually get more than a first, but that's the minimum that I would want to make that swap. And again, I think it still gives you access to top 5 running back outcomes. And it could work out really well for you if you end up with, an earlier first round pick, or just get to add a really quality prospect without really giving up a lot of production in the short term. All right, moving over to our first sell of the day. Let's talk about Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver 36 on Fantasy Calc, 90th overall player. Why would I be selling Ricky Pearsall? Well, let's just step back for a second to the prospect, Ricky Pearsall, 5-year college player, decent but not incredible as far as the age-adjusted production is concerned. Did basically nothing till his junior year. He was okay as a junior. It wasn't really until his last 2 seasons that he was very impressive in college. He had a terrible rookie year. And yes, I know that he was shot. I've heard that once or twice, if you can believe it. We will come back to that detail, but let's just put that aside and take the rookie season for what it is. He ran over 65% of the routes from weeks 11 through 16 and recorded 2 total receptions during that time. He closed out the year with a great week 17 game, no doubt about it, and a solid week 18 game where he caught a decent number of passes. His full season sample, though, just 0.16, 16% targets per out run, 1.45 yards per out run. Not good. Very, very not good numbers. And every time I have criticized or seen other people criticize Ricky Pearsall this offseason, it's always met with the same rebuttal. He was shot, he was shot, he was shot. Yes, I understand that. It's awesome that he came back and played football. It's really cool. And I understand if you want to discount his rookie year because of this context. Certainly, he deserves some level of grace. I don't know how much. I have no idea how much it limited him, and nobody else knows either. But even if you wanted to throw out the entire season and pretend it didn't happen at all, which I personally wouldn't do, I think that would be unnecessary, I still think he's overvalued at this price because, again, he was an old prospect. He was a flawed prospect. He's about to turn 25 years old in September. And whether you want to throw the rookie year out or not, he is still a year 2 player. His current valuation, the fact that he still is wide receiver 36, is a testament to the level of grace that we do give to rookies when they underperform. We've seen it with Pearsall. We're seeing it with Rome Odunze. We give a lot of grace to rookies when they struggle, especially if there's context, but that's not going to apply this year. The market is not going to be as generous for a year 2 player. Massive improvement from Pearsall is already priced in. And yeah, I think he will improve to some extent. But the idea that this is functionally his rookie year is a total fallacy in terms of how players are actually treated and valued by the market. You don't get to just free roll Pearsall year 2. If he struggles this year, he is going to plummet in value. But ultimately, this sell is less about disliking Pearsall. I'm not saying that he can't succeed. It's more about preferring other options at his cost. And that's what we're really here to talk about today. What would I rather have than Ricky Pearsall? I think there are better options if you're looking for immediate production. And I think there are better options if you're looking more for value insulation and value accrual. So my first suggestion here would be to simply liquidate Pearsall for a 2026 or a 2027 first. He's sitting kind of right on the borderline of whether that's possible. I would lean more towards no than yes in most leagues. But you have Brandon Ayuk getting negative reports. You have Jawan Jennings popping up with this calf injury. I think it could be a great time to strike if Pearsall kind of looks like the last man standing here, where he's the de facto wide receiver one in the offense. But if you can't get that trade done straight up, I'm personally fine to throw in a third round pick or throw in a bench player to push that deal over the edge and just re-roll him into a first. I'm going to feel much better about that safe investment in a future first round pick. My next idea would be to tier up. Pearsall has crept up into a range where I think you are within striking distance of wide receivers that are a similar age and just much more proven in the league. Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, George Pickens, all of these guys are close in age to Pearsall. In fact, Pickens is actually about half a year younger than him. And they've all shown considerably more as NFL wide receivers. All of them have given us really impressive target earning and per route efficiency numbers in at least one season of their career. With Olave and Waddle, we're talking multiple seasons. I am absolutely adding to Pearsall to get to one of these guys and just totally foregoing the risk, the will he break out type of thing. Because unlike other year two players, he is not young. He's going to be 25. Like, he's already the age that we expect wide receivers to be into their prime production. So the value upside for him as a year two guy is not similar to like a Rome Odunze, where he can hit this year at 23 and he could actually gain a ton of value. We're not likely to see that from Pearsall. He's unlikely to ever get far past this tier of guys, this Waddle, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison type of players. So just give me those guys. If I can throw in a late second type of value, a bench piece, that is something I want to do. And then finally, there are some options right in his range, even ranked below him, that I would much rather have in a one-to-one comparison. I would rather have Josh Downs, again, a younger player, has shown a lot more in the league. And I'd rather have Luther Burden and Jaden Higgins. I don't know why he should go ahead of either of those players. He was a very late first-round pick. They were very early second-round picks. When you take their entire prospect profiles together, both Burden and Higgins, I think, were considerably better prospects than Ricky Pearsall, and you get the value insulation of those guys being rookies. They're going to be expected to produce less this year. They're going to have more protection against downside, and they're several years younger than him. So that's an easy choice for me to just pivot to Burden and Higgins and get the fresh start rather than holding the bag on Ricky Pearsall right now. All right, our last buy of the day is Chris Olave, wide receiver 32, 82nd overall on Fantasy Calc. I did not want to do this, but the market has left me no choice. I understand I've talked about Chris Olave. I will scream into the void one more time, and then you don't have to hear me talk about Chris Olave again for the rest of the offseason. Okay? But this guy is being left for dead. Wide receiver 32. He's only 4 wide receiver spots ahead of Ricky Pearsall. This guy has been incredibly efficient on a per route basis dating back to his rookie year. He has never been under 2 yards per out run. I understand that injuries and bad offenses have limited his fantasy output, and I think both of those things are valid reasons to slightly discount him in Dynasty. I just think it's gone way too far. I understand the quarterback situation is a little bit bleak, but he's still fairly young. Like, we have confirmation that this is a good football player who still has his entire prime ahead of him. So I don't think we should be factoring in the 2025 Saints situation too heavily here. But Kellen Moore, I think, does offer some hope as a more creative play caller than Olave has had previously. The Saints' offensive line is a little bit better, and he's got very little target competition on a team that should be trailing a lot because their defense is not good. It's really just going to flow through Olave and Rashid Shaheed and then dump offs to Alvin Kamara. There is nobody else in this offense that demands targets. And I think, the market has just totally buried this guy for reasons I think are more emotional than logical. I think people have been burned by him, but not because he's not talented. He's a very talented wide receiver, and that's what I want to buy into. So to get my hands on Chris Olave, my first suggestion would be to tier down. And I have that in quotes because I have Olave ranked ahead of all these players. But you don't have to add to these players to get him in the majority of leagues. I would happily tier down from Devonta Smith, Zay Flowers, DJ Moore, Jamison Williams to get Olave plus pretty much anything else. Again, if I was forced to choose, I'd rather have Olave personally. I think he's the best player here outside of maybe Zay Flowers, who's got his own limitations in his offense in terms of passing volume. So give me Olave over all these guys. If you can tier down, add a third, couple thirds, a bench player, whatever it might be, I'm into that. Tier up, I will happily add a future second to Khalil Shakir or Chris Godwin or Cortland Sutton or Keon Coleman to either get a player I think is better and has more upside, or a player in the case of Godwin and Sutton who's just significantly younger. That is something that I'm interested in doing. And then finally, pivot options. If you're sitting on Chuba Hubbard or Alvin Kamara, and maybe you're a little bit lighter at wide receiver, he's probably my favorite target in that price range, where you could just make a 1-for-1 swap, move one of these running backs straight up for Chris Olave. All right, our last player of the day is a bit of a deep cut. I'm going to be selling rookie tight end Elijah Arroyo for the Seahawks. He is the tight end 18 right now on Fantasy Calc, 144th overall, but he is a steady riser right now because he's been getting these positive camp reports that he's being moved around the formation, that he's going to be a big piece for the Seahawks. I'm a little bit skeptical of this, and I think that you can sell him right now for more than he is realistically likely to be worth. My first issue with Elijah Arroyo is that he cannot block in line. I am not an expert film evaluator of tight ends, but I think that's where most evidence would point, and I will defer to Max Toscano, who writes Remember the Tight Ends on Substack. He's been on Dynasty Points. He's been on a lot of shows. He really understands how the tight end position works, and he wrote a lot about how Elijah Arroyo is basically a non-functional blocker. The mechanics are totally wrong. He just can't do it. I don't think we're going to see this guy play as a traditional Y tight end very much at all, which is why the team is already talking about moving him around the formation. The thing is, I don't know that he's necessarily better than a wide receiver playing out wide. Typically, when we have these tight ends that are mismatches, they typically play out of the slot. Like Travis Kelce, Brock Bowers, they're doing most of their damage from the slot. The problem with that is that the Seahawks' two best wide receivers both operate best in the slot, JSN and Cooper Kupp. And so that doesn't leave a lot of meat on the bone for Arroyo to command these snaps. So like, unless we think he's going to play 25% of his snaps in the slot and get a little bit at the Y tight end, he's going to have to be split out a ton to really pay off in terms of a route share. What I think we're likely to see here is a good player who plays more of a part-time role. The Seahawks seem to like A.J. Barner, and I think this is going to line up similarly to Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox, where, yeah, they like Dalton Kincaid in Buffalo, but they also like running the ball efficiently, and they like having a tight end that can block. I think we're going to see Barner playing a lot of those traditional tight end snaps, Arroyo moving around, sometimes in clear passing situations. He's in as the Y tight end, or he's playing like an F wide receiver spot, like a big slot. I just don't know how much upside is here, again, because I don't see how he's going to play a full-time role, and that is so huge for tight ends to have any type of legitimate fantasy upside. And then the last little layer on top here is just that Elijah Arroyo has a very concerning medical history. He has dealt with a lot of injuries throughout college, and I think that's something that we should be mindful of with him as well. But mostly for me, it comes down to the role. I don't understand the math equation on how he is going to be a big hit at his cost. But again, I do think the medicals matter a little bit. As far as how to move Arroyo, my first suggestion here is probably not going to be very popular to anyone who's an Arroyo fan. But if I have him on my team, unless it's like a heavy tight end premium, if it's just a regular 0.5 tight end premium, I'm fine to sell him for a 2026 or 2027 second. Again, that's my expectation, that he's not going to be able to deliver any type of high-end production, even if he is being used in a more versatile role. I would also be willing to pivot to another rookie tight end that I like a little bit better in Terrence Ferguson. I think he has more of an every down type of upside case. He's also getting rave reviews from the Rams. And then the other tight end is also named Ferguson. It'd be Jake Ferguson for the Cowboys. Again, a guy who projects to play pretty much every down in a much, much better passing offense. Just got a long-term extension with the Cowboys. So I like both of those guys a little bit better than Elijah Arroyo. And then finally, some pivot options, again, in the same value range that are not tight ends. So we've got some running backs here in Byshal Tootin, Dylan Sampson, Tyjae Spears, and Jordan Mason. I'd rather have these guys. Certainly, they're going to have shorter shelf lives than Elijah Arroyo if he's a hit. But I think the likelihood that these guys hit and give you something that is legitimately useful above replacement production that's not easy to find via a much cheaper trade for somebody like Zach Ertz or Hunter Henry or whoever, I think these guys are more likely to deliver that type of ceiling. And so I'd rather bet on these running backs rather than trying to find that unconventional rookie tight end that hits right away. Anyway, that's going to do it for today, guys. I hope I gave you some good ideas, moves you can make on your dynasty teams right now. As always, thank you for watching this video. Thank you for supporting the channel. If you enjoy my dynasty content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Really goes a long way. And if you want even more dynasty content from me, you can consider becoming a YouTube member by hitting the little plus on the subscribe button or going to the link in the description. And that's going to get you access to weekly live streams right here on YouTube, private channels in the Pure Potential Discord where I answer questions and talk Dynasty pretty much all day, every day, and also my top 200 Dynasty rankings, which are a pretty useful resource for startup drafts or just navigating trades in your leagues pretty much all the time. Either way, guys, I'll be back soon with another Dynasty video, and I hope I'll see you then.